All right, let's dive in. Today, it's South Korea.
South Korea.
We're going to go deeper than just the K-pop and the Samsung. We're really going to get a full picture of this country.
Right, yeah. It's so much more than just those headlines. There's so much to discover.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So much to discover.
Yeah.
And luckily, we've got a pretty big stack of sources here to help us unpack it all.
Awesome.
Everything from the geography to the people to the history, even the name Korea itself.
Oh, the name. That's interesting.
Yeah.
You know, to start with, just geographically, South Korea is a peninsula.
Okay.
So it's got a land border with North Korea, of course. But then look at a map. It's almost entirely surrounded by water.
Oh, wow.
The Yellow Sea, the East China Sea, Sea of Japan.
All right. So not a ton of land borders then.
Not really, no.
But wait, our sources say 70% of South Korea is mountainous.
Yeah.
So that's not exactly like beach vacation vibes, is it?
Not quite. No, it means that most of the population is concentrated in those lowland areas, especially around the capital, Seoul.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to build where you can build.
Right, and that geographic reality has shaped everything, urbanization, resource management.
It makes you wonder about those mountain regions, though. What's up there? Hidden villages, temples. I'm getting like movie vibes.
Well, you've definitely got a lot of diverse ecosystem.
Okay.
Alpine forests to subtropical plants on Jeju Island,
Oh, Jeju Island.
largest island in South Korea.
Okay.
And it even has a volcanic peak, Hallasan, almost 2,000 meters high.
Jeju Island is going on my list. Wow. Okay, but you said diverse ecosystems.
Yeah.
I always just kind of assumed South Korea was mostly mega cities. Did they have large animals too?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Tigers, leopards, even bears.
No way.
Unfortunately, deforestation and poaching kind of did their thing. Tigers and leopards are considered extinct in the South.
That's so sad.
Yeah. Thankfully, there are still bears in protected areas, at least.
That's good. That's good. It's just, just always kind of hits you the impact we have,
Yeah.
Even in a country as technologically advanced as South Korea.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of, South Korea,
Mm-hmm.
the name Korea itself, that has a really old origin story.
It does. Really old. It goes all the way back to the Samhan Confederacy.
Oh.
So these three ancient kingdoms on the peninsula,
Mm.
the word Han from Samhan gets used later in the name of one of their empires, centuries later.
Whoa, so it's like history coming full circle. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got Korea. It's got some weight behind it. But what about those other names? Our sources mention, like Dahanminguk, Hanguk.
Mhm.
What are those about?
Right. The name game.
Yeah, the name game.
Dahanminguk is the official name.
Okay.
Great Korean Republic. Hanguk is more like everyday talk, Basically Korea plus state.
Gotcha. It's almost like each name reflects like a different layer of meaning.
Right.
Oh, I'm curious. What does North Korea call South Korea?
Oh, that's a good question. They don't use South Korea, they use Nam Chosun, which basically means South Chosun.
So Chosun.
Chosun is another old name for Korea.
Fascinating. Like each name has its own perspective, But speaking of perspective, we got to talk about population. How does that all play into this?
Yeah, that's really important because South Korea, it's got over 51 million people,
Wow.
but their population growth is actually really slowing down.
Totally.
We're talking like plus 0.1% growth rate.
Oh, wow.
And their birth rate, it's just 0.8 children per woman.
That's incredibly low.
One of the lowest in the world.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because those numbers, those are telling a story about the future.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a potentially shrinking workforce and aging population.
Mm-hmm.
These are challenges.
Absolutely. It raises so many questions about their immigration policies, how they're going to support their aging population. And then you've got the whole issue of North Korean refugees.
Oh.
How do they integrate into South Korean society?
That's a huge cultural shift.
Huge. Our sources even mention this Hanawan Resettlement Center.
What's that?
It's specifically for North Korean defectors to help them adjust.
Wow. You can't even imagine that culture shock. It really highlights how, even within one country, you can have such vastly different experiences.
Huh.
And speaking of different, let's talk religion,
Okay.
because it blew my mind. More than half of South Koreans identify as irreligious.
Yeah. It's pretty unique, and a lot of it has to do with Confucianism.
Confucianism.
It's not a religion in the traditional sense.
Right.
It's more like a philosophical, ethical system that's just been ingrained in Korean society for centuries. Think of it like this underlying framework that guides how they interact, how they make decisions.
So it's a little about organized religion and more about these shared values, principles.
Exactly. But it's not the whole story. You also see a resurgence of both Christianity and Buddhism since the 1950s. It's almost like you've got these layers of belief.
Fascinating. It just shows how cultures are always evolving, adapting. And speaking of evolving and adapting, we have to talk about South Korea's journey, right? I mean, they went from war to economic powerhouse. The Miracle on the Han River, it's called. Where do we even begin with that story?
It's an incredible story.
It is.
You have to start with the devastation of the Korean War.
Right. 1950s.
1950s, it ripped the peninsula apart, left South Korea in ruins.
And the impact of that war is still felt today, right?
Absolutely. It's a stark reminder that peace and prosperity, they're precious and hard-won.
Yeah. But then, out of that devastation, they pulled off something truly remarkable.
They did.
Really did.
Went from poverty to one of the world's leading economies in just a few decades. And a big part of that transformation was Park Chung-hee.
Park Chung-hee, controversial leader,
Very controversial.
ruled from 61 to 79.
That's right.
He's the one who really pushed for the chaebol system, right? And for anyone who hasn't brushed up on their Korean economic terms, what exactly are chaebols?
Think Samsung, Hyundai, LG. These massive family-controlled conglomerates, they're the giants of the South Korean economy.
So they're involved in everything.
Pretty much. Electronics, shipbuilding, construction, insurance, you name it.
So basically, if it's made in Korea, a chaebol probably had a hand in it.
It's a good bet, yeah. And those chaebols, they were absolutely key in propelling South Korea onto the world stage. But, you know, that kind of rapid economic development, it doesn't come without costs.
Right, exactly. Our sources talk about some eyebrow-raising stuff. Labor exploitation, government business ties, suppression of dissent. It sounds like Park Chung-hee's rule was a real mixed bag.
Yeah, it really was. And his legacy, it's still debated in South Korea today. It makes you think about the trade-offs between economic progress and social justice, you know. Was that miracle on the Han River worth it? That's a question for historians and for South Koreans to grapple with. But there's no denying he left a mark.
A big one.
Oh, a huge mark. But Park Chung-hee, you know, that wasn't the end of South Korea's story. That was just the beginning of another chapter, really. Their transition to democracy.
Right, 1987. Big year.
Read you.
First democratic elections after years of authoritarian rule. I mean, that must have been a massive shift.
Oh, it was a major turning point. But it's important to remember, the path to democracy, that was not easy.
Right.
Protests, crackdowns, and, you know, you can't forget the Gwangju uprising.
Well, Gwangju Uprising.
Citizens were demanding reforms, and they were met with violence.
It's a reminder that freedom, democracy, it comes at a cost.
It does.
But in the end, South Korea persevered. They became this vibrant democracy, a testament to the resilience of the people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that resilience, that's helped them become a major player on the world stage.
They're everywhere.
Everywhere.
The UN, the OECD, the WTO, you name it.
You're there.
And then there's the economic influence, from electronics to vehicles, even those massive ships you see out on the ocean.
Yeah, South Korea's a manufacturing powerhouse.
They are. And then, of course, you've got the Korean wave.
Oh, the Korean wave.
It's taken the world by storm, right?
Absolutely. K-pop, Korean dramas, the food.
You can't deny the power of K-pop.
You can't.
I mean, BTS, they're a global phenomenon. Top of the charts, they've even spoken at the UN. Music as a diplomatic tool. Who knew?
Right. It's amazing how they've used their culture to really enhance their standing internationally. But their influence, it goes beyond just culture, right? I mean, they're pushing boundaries in tech.
Oh yeah, robotics, AI, all of that.
It's incredible when you think about it, right? Fastest internet in the world, leading producer of semiconductors, they're a hub for robotics. Are we even talking about the same South Korea that was devastated by war just a few decades ago?
It's really mind-blowing. They've come so far, so fast.
It really is.
It's inspiring. It really speaks to their dedication to education, research, development. But our sources also mention something a bit more controversial. Internet censorship policies.
Right, yeah. That's a big point of contention. You've got people arguing it stifles freedom of expression, limits access to information. It raises some big questions about security versus individual liberties in this digital age.
It's a debate we're having everywhere, not just South Korea. It's one of the challenges that comes with this rapid technological advancement. And speaking of challenges, What about reunification with North Korea? Is that even a realistic goal at this point?
Oh, that's a tough one.
It is.
I mean, our sources touch on the economic concerns, the vastly different political systems, the whole legacy of division. You've got two very distinct societies on that peninsula.
It's hard to picture those two merging. It would be a monumental task.
Absolutely. And there are strong opinions on both sides.
Of course.
Some see reunification as a moral imperative, a way to heal old wounds, create a truly unified Korean nation.
Right.
Others are much more cautious. They point to the potential economic burden, the risk of social upheaval.
It's a very emotionally charged issue.
It is.
And for good reason. There have been moments of hope, like the summit back in 2000. But the road to reunification, it's still uncertain.
Very uncertain. It's clear that any kind of reunification, it would require a ton of planning, open dialogue, and a real willingness to compromise from both sides. It's not happening overnight. And it's something that wouldn't just impact Korea, it would impact the entire region. Geopolitics, security alliances, global trade, everything.
It's a reminder that South Korea's future, it's intertwined with its neighbor, whether they like it or not. But, okay, let's shift gears for a second, talk about South Korea's relationships with other countries. Some of those are more complicated than others, right?
Oh, definitely. Take their relationship with Japan, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
That one's loaded with historical baggage.
For sure.
From Japan's colonization of Korea in the early 20th century.
Right. There are still issues related to forced labor, the comfort women from World War II. Those wounds from the past, they still impact things today.
Yeah. Despite efforts at reconciliation, there's still a lot of mistrust, resentment. It's a reminder that healing those kinds of wounds, it takes time, sincere effort, and a willingness to acknowledge the wrongs that were done.
Yeah, it's a reminder that history isn't just something in a textbook. Exactly. It shapes how countries interact, even decades later. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom on the diplomacy front, right? South Korea has some good relationships too.
Oh, absolutely. Their ties with Germany, for example, those are considered quite positive. They work together on promoting democracy, and there's a growing cultural exchange, thanks in part to the Korean wave reaching Germany.
And Germany actually played a role in South Korea's economic rise, too.
That's right.
Remember, we talked about those Korean miners who were recruited to work in Germany back in the 60s.
Yeah, it's a lesser-known part of their shared history. It shows how even countries that seem so different can have these unexpected connections.
It's all part of this big, messy web of global relationships.
It really is.
This whole deep dive has been full of surprises. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, and with each layer, there's more complexity.
So true.
And we haven't even covered everything.
I know, right? That's what makes it so fascinating. South Korea, it's a country of contrasts, contradictions, and incredible resilience. They've faced adversity, but they've achieved so much.
You really have.
And as they navigate all the challenges of the 21st century, they just keep evolving.
In ways that are both captivating and, I think, thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've learned a ton about South Korea, but, we got to bring it back to our listener. Why should they care about all of this? I mean, what's the takeaway beyond K-pop and all the cool gadgets?
That's a great question. I think South Korea's story has a lot to teach us about economic development, the ups and downs of democracy, how to navigate a world that's constantly changing.
Right.
Their journey, from devastation to global powerhouse, that's a testament to human resilience, innovation, adaptability.
And it really shows that history matters.
Oh, absolutely.
All those events, from the Korean War to the rise of the K-balls, they're still shaping South Korea today.
Absolutely. And speaking of today, we can't ignore what's happening in South Korean politics right now. Things are a little shaky, to say the least.
Oh, yeah. What's going on?
Well, our sources mention this political crisis that erupted late last year. President Yoon Suk-yeol, he declared martial law.
Martial law. Whoa, okay. What was the reason?
He was trying to push through his budget.
His budget. Through martial law.
Yeah. It was a pretty controversial move.
I can imagine.
The opposition immediately called for his resignation.
Wow.
And then the parliament, they voted to impeach him.
They impeached him. So is he out?
Not so fast. It goes to the Constitutional Court now. They get to decide his fate.
So South Korea's democracy is really being put to the test.
Yeah, you could say that. It's a good reminder that even in countries with well-established democracies, things can get messy. It shows how important those strong institutions are, the checks and balances, and, citizens have to be ready to defend their democratic principles.
Absolutely. Democracy is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
You got to stay vigilant. But this whole political drama, it's happening with this other, constant pressure, the threat from North Korea.
Right, exactly. No matter what else is going on, the situation with the North, it never goes away. It's a source of tension, and it limits what they can do in terms of foreign policy and security.
It must be tough to balance the need for a strong military with, the desire for peace and dialogue.
Oh, it's incredibly complex, and the stakes are high. Not just for Korea, but for the whole region.
It's easy to focus on the K-pop, the tech, all the good stuff, but this deep dive, it's shown us that South Korea has some serious challenges ahead.
Definitely. And it reminds us that even with their economic success, their global influence, there are still divisions, unresolved conflicts, uncertainty about the future.
One thing that really struck me, though, was South Korea's ambition in space exploration.
Oh, yeah.
They've got their own space program. They launched a rocket a couple of years ago. They're even working with Russia on some space tech.
They're not messing around. It really shows their drive, pushing the boundaries of science, wanting to be a leader in space.
It makes you wonder what's next for them. They've already come so far, so fast.
Right. And that brings me to a final thought I want to leave with our listeners. South Korea, they're at the forefront of this technological wave. But how will they deal with things like automation, social inequality?
Good question.
Can they stay a global leader while making sure everyone benefits from their progress?
Yeah, that's a question worth thinking about. And it's not just for South Korea. It's something we all need to consider as we all kind of move into this, future with all its complexities.
Well said. I think this deep dive into South Korea, it's been a fascinating journey. Lots of surprises, lots to learn.
Absolutely. We covered a lot, from their geography to their history, culture, politics, technology. It's been a whirlwind.
It has.
But hopefully it sparked some curiosity, inspired you to keep learning about this incredible country.
Exactly. So until next time, keep exploring.
Keep exploring.